For 50 years, Ron Howard looked like he had the perfect life. People saw him as a sweet, all-American boy from Mayberry who grew into one of Hollywood's most respected directors. He rarely caused trouble, rarely ended up in scandals, and always seemed gentle and calm. But in his most recent interview, he finally opened up about the hidden pain behind his calm smile. He talked about the heartbreaking decision he made in 1991 that still stays with him, the family member he nearly lost to addiction while the world was praising him with awards, and the terrifying moment on set when his own body collapsed from stress. His confession finally explained the truth about those silent months when he disappeared from the public eye, and it revealed a painful side of him that few people ever knew. Ronald William Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma. From the moment he was born, acting was already in the air around him. His father, Rance Howard, had been using the name Howard as his stage name since 1948, long before Ron was born. Ron served in the Air Force, but he also held on to big acting dreams. His mother, Jean Spiegel, was a trained actress who married Rance in 1949 in Kentucky. So when little Ron came into the world, he was born into a home where movies, scripts, rehearsals, and dreams were part of daily life. Even before Ron could speak full sentences, he was already in front of a camera. At just 18 months old, he appeared in a Western movie called Frontier Woman, filmed in late 1955 and early 1956. Most toddlers were learning how to walk and talk, but Ron was learning how to hit a mark on the floor, how to stand in front of lights, and how to react when the director shouted action. His childhood blended with show business in a way he didn't understand at the time. It was the beginning of a life where work and childhood became the same thing. As television grew on the West Coast, the Howards packed up everything and left Oklahoma. Rance drove the family straight to California, not for glamour or wealth, but because that was where the new TV industry was exploding. He didn't want fame, he wanted opportunity. By living close to studios and producers, he hoped his family would have a future in the industry. Ron was still just a toddler when he started meeting producers and walking past film sets. Before he ever sat in a classroom, he sat in front of cameras. He was appearing on shows like Playhouse 90 even before he reached kindergarten. When his little brother Clint was born in 1959 in Burbank, it was already clear that their family's big gamble was working. Rance managed all of Ron's earnings himself. He didn't hire outsiders or let studios control his son's life. He took more than 140 film jobs and nearly 180 TV appearances, not because he was chasing fame, but because he wanted to stay closer to Ron's sets and guide him every step of the way. Then came the night that changed everything, October 3rd, 1960. Ron was 6 years old when America first met Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. He was credited as Ronnie Howard, just another kid actor on paper. But something deeper happened behind the scenes that made the role extraordinary. Rance didn't just drop his son off at work, he was fully involved. During an early rehearsal, he told the producers that the father-son scenes didn't feel real. Andy Griffith listened to him. Together, they agreed to make the father-son relationship on the show mirror the real bond between Ron and Rance. That simple handshake helped create one of the most beloved relationships in TV history. Rance even appeared on the show several times, staying close while Ron worked through long hours, complex scripts, and the pressure that most adults would struggle with. For 8 seasons, Ron grew up on those sets, acting in stories about small-town life while carrying the weight of a busy adult career. At home, the Howards lived simply. They didn't spend money like movie stars. The kids ate everyday meals like meatloaf and fish sticks. They saved money because they knew entertainment jobs could disappear at any moment. Ron went to regular public schools in Burbank when he wasn't filming, and his parents insisted on giving him as normal a life as possible. He played sports in local parks and spent time with his brother Clint, who also started acting and eventually collected more than 200 acting credits. But even with this balance, Ron's life was very different from other kids his age. He was taught to approach acting not with cuteness but with sincerity. Rance trained him to listen carefully, pause naturally, and respond like a real person instead of a child trying to be adorable. Producer Sheldon Leonard noticed immediately and said Ron didn't try to charm the camera. He simply told the truth. Even at 6 years old, Ron acted with an honesty that impressed adults. As the show became more popular, his pay increased, and his face became familiar to millions of Americans. Fans stopped him on the streets of Burbank asking for autographs, even while he was still losing baby teeth. But fame came with a price. While everyone loved seeing him on TV, they didn't see the childhood he slowly lost. One of his most famous moments came in 1963 in an episode called Opie the Birdman. Ron was 9 years old when he filmed the emotional scenes of Opie caring for baby birds after accidentally killing their mother. There were no special tricks. He just stood there and let real sadness wash over him. Andy Griffith said Ron showed timing and depth far beyond his age. Ron used a technique he learned early, thinking of something that truly hurt, then letting those feelings disappear once the scene ended. It was powerful, but it also meant he was using emotions that most children never have to manage on command. Despite the love he received on set, Ron often felt isolated. He later described those years as living inside a golden cage, safe, admired, but separated from the real world. California law required 3 hours of schooling each day, so he had a little classroom right next to the filming stage. He didn't get recess or share lunch with kids his age. Instead, he studied math while camera crews moved equipment around him. Lunch breaks meant sitting with Andy, or Don Knotts, or a member of the crew. They tried to make him feel like part of a family, but Ron still longed for everyday childhood moments like riding bikes around the neighborhood or playing baseball with friends. In 1962, he faced a new challenge when he acted in The Music Man. He was only 8, and although he had a major role, he struggled with singing and dancing. He became overwhelmed during filming and quietly told Shirley Jones that he didn't think he could do it. She comforted him, helped him breathe, and encouraged him until he found his confidence again. The crew even filmed him from the knees up to hide the fact that the tap dance sounds were added later. Despite the difficulties, Ron delivered a memorable performance, and the movie became one of the biggest hits of that year. Behind the scenes, he worked extremely hard. He memorized not only his own lines, but also Shirley Jones's lines, and he played with dolls the way a director blocks a scene. Shirley Jones told people that Ron wasn't just acting, he was directing even at that young age. His father taught him even more about storytelling by explaining how to analyze scenes and understand the purpose of each character's words. These lessons didn't disappear. They sat quietly in Ron's mind until he grew older and finally stepped behind the camera. By the age of 13, Ron experienced his first real disappointment when the Western series The Monroes, which he joined in 1966, was canceled after only 26 episodes. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't good enough. Even though The Andy Griffith Show was still going strong, the rejection hurt him deeply and stayed with him. In 1968, he turned down an audition for The Brady Bunch. The decision wasn't his. His parents wanted balance in his life and agreed that at least one of them needed to be home every day. Ron actually wanted to try the part, but he respected their choice. That decision ended up protecting his career, because a few years later, in 1974, he became Richie Cunningham in Happy Days, a role that carried him into adulthood and opened the door to directing. His earnings from The Andy Griffith Show reruns brought him around $50,000 a year, more than some professional athletes at the time. But again, the family stayed frugal. They saved money, invested in bonds, and lived a modest life. Ron wanted to invest in a go-kart business with friends. His parents let him try, but he lost $25,000. It became his first lesson in financial risk. When the final episode of The Andy Griffith Show aired in 1968, Ron was 14 years old. He walked around the set one last time, knowing every corner by heart. He felt something heavy inside him, something ending. That set had been his entire childhood. Years later, in 1974, a meeting with Gary Marshall changed everything. Ron didn't audition the normal way. He simply sat down and ordered a cherry phosphate soda, acting like he already belonged there. His chemistry with Henry Winkler was immediate. Despite ABC having doubts about his ability to play a teenager, Marshall believed in him, and Ron signed a big contract. But by season 5 of Happy Days, Ron felt trapped. He had been playing a cheerful teenager while the real world was full of serious issues like the Vietnam War. He wrote a memo to ABC asking for more truthful topics, but the network rejected his ideas because they feared losing advertisers. Ron felt suffocated and realized he needed more control over his work. That desire slowly pushed him toward directing. By the late 1970s, he finally got his chance. He directed a few episodes of Happy Days and later made a deal with filmmaker Roger Corman. He would act in the movie Eat My Dust only if he was allowed to direct his own movie next. Corman agreed, and that decision led to the 1977 film Grand Theft Auto, which Ron co-wrote with his dad. The movie cost just over $600,000 to make, but earned around $15 million. That massive success proved that Ron wasn't just a red-haired kid from Mayberry. He was a serious filmmaker. And from that point on, Hollywood finally understood that Ron Howard was far more than a childhood star. He was a storyteller shaped by decades of silent pressure, emotional challenges, and a lifetime spent in front of the camera before he ever learned what a normal childhood felt like. Ron was only 21 years old when he married Cheryl Alley on June 7, 1975. They had known each other since high school, and their love had grown naturally over the years. His proposal wasn't planned in a fancy restaurant or at a special event. Instead, he proposed while sitting on a couch at his parents' home. It was simple and honest, just like their relationship. Their wedding day was filled with familiar faces from Ron's life and career. Henry Winkler, who was not only his co-star but one of his closest friends, stood beside him as his best man. Actors Andy Griffith and Tom Bosley also attended, showing how much support Ron had from the people he worked with. When Cheryl went into labor with their first child, Ron was filming on set. As soon as he got the news, he stopped everything and rushed to the hospital. Later in life, he often said that Cheryl had always been the true center of his story. While he focused on acting, writing, and directing, she held their world together quietly and without seeking credit. She supported him through every busy schedule, long night, and high-pressure moment. In 1982, Ron decided to take a bold creative leap with a comedy called Night Shift. The plot was unusual and risky. It followed two men who started running a prostitution business out of a New York City morgue. It starred Henry Winkler and introduced Michael Keaton in his first major movie role. The film had an $8 million budget and made $21 million. During filming, Michael Keaton recorded ideas on a tape recorder, danced around with a Walkman, and even shouted, "Is this a great country or what?" Test audiences thought the movie was too wild, and the MPAA became nervous about the content. But the film worked. Winkler received a Golden Globe nomination, and Keaton's performance suddenly made him a star. The success showed that Ron could make big studio films that weren't safe or predictable. Just 2 years later, Ron directed another film that changed his career, Splash. Released in 1984, it told the story of a man, played by Tom Hanks, who fell in love with a mermaid, played by Daryl Hannah. This was the first movie released by Disney's new Touchstone Pictures label. With a budget somewhere between $8 and $11 million, it earned nearly $70 million. Daryl Hannah wore a mermaid tail that weighed 35 pounds, and attaching it took hours. She performed all of her underwater scenes without a stunt double because she swam better than most of the professionals. At first, the movie had a sad ending where Madison returned to the ocean and Alan stayed behind. But during test screenings, every married woman in the audience disliked the ending. The filmmakers changed it so Alan dove into the ocean to be with Madison. The new ending won the audience's hearts. Critics praised the film, and it earned a 91% score on Rotten Tomatoes along with an Oscar nomination. Tom Hanks became a major star, and Ron proved he could lead films to huge box office success. In November 1985, Ron and producer Brian Grazer formed Imagine Entertainment. They merged their separate companies and took Imagine public the next year. Major studios like TriStar Pictures, Showtime, and the Movie Channel signed deals with them. Imagine began producing TV movies, theatrical films, and eventually successful television shows. Their Century City offices later got a major renovation costing $4.5 million in 1998. Even though people questioned the spending, Imagine's achievements outweighed any concerns. Over the years, their projects earned more than 43 Oscar nominations and nearly 200 Emmy nominations. Their films eventually made over $15 billion worldwide. In 2001, Ron directed A Beautiful Mind, determined to tell the story of mathematician John Nash in a way that made audiences truly feel the character's inner world. He avoided using flashy visual effects to show Nash hallucinations. Instead, he filmed them as if they were real because that's how Nash experienced them. The movie was shot mostly in chronological order, with Ron returning to Princeton multiple times to keep details accurate. On March 24, 2002, the film won 4 Oscars, including Best Director for Ron. But the film also faced criticism for leaving out some painful parts of Nash's real life, such as an affair, an abandoned child, and a past arrest. Still, the movie made over $313 million worldwide and touched millions of viewers. 5 years later, Ron faced a different kind of challenge when he directed The Da Vinci Code in 2006. With a $125 million budget and Tom Hanks starring as Robert Langdon, the film seemed guaranteed to succeed. But the Catholic Church refused to cooperate. Churches in Paris and London denied access for filming. Ron's team had to digitally recreate entire church interiors. At St. Sulpice, even tiny mistakes in digital measurements caused major problems. Filming at Westminster Abbey was impossible, so they moved scenes to Lincoln and Winchester cathedrals. Lincoln charged $100,000 and only allowed filming between August 15th and 19th. The Louvre allowed filming but only at night, and the real Mona Lisa could not be lit directly, so 5 realistic copies were made. Despite all these challenges, the film made $758 million worldwide. During this time, Ron experienced deep personal loss. His father, Rance Howard, who had appeared in many of Ron's films, died in 2017 at the age of 89, only months after Ron's mother passed away. Rance had been born Harold Engel Beckenholt in Oklahoma in 1928 and had worked tirelessly through his life, appearing in shows like The Waltons, Seinfeld, and Grey's Anatomy. He had taught Ron everything about acting and storytelling. Losing him left a quiet space in Ron's heart. In 2008, Ron directed Frost and Nixon, a film about the interviews between David Frost and Richard Nixon. He carefully studied real footage to capture every detail of Nixon's behavior. The film earned 5 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, but despite the critical praise, it made only $28.5 million. Ron's personal life was steady but not without its own struggles. He and his wife Cheryl had made a promise early in their marriage: no work talk at the dinner table. That rule lasted 50 years. They raised 4 children: Bryce Dallas, twins Jocelyn and Paige, and their son Reed. Ron once directed one of Bryce's school plays when she was 5, and he later regretted pushing her too early into acting. She forgave him and built her own successful career, eventually earning $8 million per Jurassic World film. Ron's younger brother Clint struggled for years with addiction. Hollywood had treated him harshly, and by 1990, he was at rock bottom. Ron told him he had to choose between rehab and losing the relationship entirely. Clint chose rehab, and they later shared their story in their memoir The Boys, where Ron admitted he felt guilty for unintentionally overshadowing his brother. In 1991, Ron's daughter Jocelyn was born. The next year, Ron spent 6 months filming Far and Away in Ireland. When he returned home, he realized how much he had missed. His newborn had changed, and Bryce hardly remembered him. Nancy had been caring for the children alone. Ron promised he would never take such a long shoot again. He mostly kept that promise, but in 2005, filming Cinderella Man required long reshoots, and he missed more time with Bryce. In 2025, during his 50th wedding anniversary celebration, Ron donated a bench to the high school where he and Cheryl first met. He admitted that he regretted missing so much of their early family life. Cheryl understood, but she also quietly wished he had learned those lessons sooner. In 2020, Ron directed Hillbilly Elegy for Netflix, a film that critics strongly criticized. Despite the backlash, Glenn Close earned multiple award nominations for her performance. That same year, Ron released Rebuilding Paradise, a documentary about the deadly 2018 Camp Fire in California. This tragedy had personally affected his family because his mother-in-law had lived in paradise. Filming the destruction and the stories of loss broke Ron emotionally, and he said it was the hardest project he had ever worked on. In 2025, Ron released Eden, a survival thriller set in the 1930s Galapagos Islands. He had discovered the story over 15 years earlier during a vacation and began outlining it immediately on his old BlackBerry phone. The cast included Sydney Sweeney, Jude Law, Ana de Armas, Vanessa Kirby, and Daniel Bruhl. The film cost $55 million to make but earned just $1 million on opening weekend. Ron admitted the experience filled him with anxiety. He had already considered retiring earlier when Solo, a Star Wars story, a film he had taken over midway through production, struggled badly at the box office. But his daughter Bryce encouraged him not to give up. By 2025, Ron and Brian Grazer had run Imagine Entertainment for 40 years. The company had produced more than 50 films, earned 4 to 7 Oscar nominations, and nearly 300 Emmy nominations. Ron's net worth surpassed $200 million. He remained grateful for the lessons his father taught him about humility and hard work. He continued mentoring young directors, sharing his experiences honestly, the good parts and the painful ones. And though he had lived a long and successful life in Hollywood, he still remembered the simple moments. The bench where he first met the girl he loved, the empty seat at dinner from a night he wasn't home, and the child who didn't recognize him when he returned from a long shoot. He carried every memory with him, shaping the stories he continued to tell.